Hey everybody, Tekking101 here, and I'm making this video for one singular purpose today. I freaking love Dr. Stone, and I don't think there's enough people on the internet talking about Dr. Stone, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Are you ready? I'm ready for it. I know you guys are out there. I know this series has a huge fan base. I'm reading the chapters in the comments section. There's huge discussions about it. On my live streams, I see people talking about it all the time. Talk about Dr. Stone Tekking. Is like, well, here we are, and I'm a fan, obviously, like I have right here. I'm putting like a little breadcrumb trail of clues through my videos. Like, I dig Dr. Stone, right? So, I was thinking about what this video should be, though. Should I make a video that was, like, kind of spoiler light, and I just talk about why you should get into Dr. Stone, and just give a brief overview of the characters and everything? And then I realized, no. I have had so much hype build up for this series. I'm about to explode with it. We just hit chapter 100. We're entering a new arc. It's gonna be a good one. So, I'm sorry, but there's gonna be a lot of spoilers in this video. Let's just have a huge fanboy, fangirl session about this. If you just want my opinion on if you should read it, yes. The anime adaptation is coming out in July, so maybe if you're more of a fan of just animated media, you can wait for that, or you can pick it up right now. I will say this, though. It is not, and don't take this as a negative, but this is not a series that I was addicted to at, like, chapter 1. There are very few series that managed to do that with me, like at chapter 1, I'm just hooked. It took about until around chapter 13 or so when I started to really get into the flow of the series, and I had some problems with it at first, and I'll talk about that in this video. But if you just want my off-the-cuff recommendation, yeah, pick it up. You might not have the same issues I had with it. Maybe you'll get into it at chapter 1 or chapter 2, but yeah, that's my recommendation. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with the problems I had with it, and I'll just go over this very briefly, because they're not really fair, and I've gotten over it a long time ago, but I just wanted to talk about my first impressions of it, okay? So, I did like the premise at first, okay, world turns to stone, alright, that's cool, that's something different, haven't seen that before, it's going to be a science fiction sort of thing, we're going to have all these different scientific principles scattered throughout. I could tell that from the very beginning. Looked like it would be cool, right? The thing that threw me off was right around chapter 3 and 4 when Tsukasa made his introduction. Okay? Do you remember when Tsukasa woke up? Remember the first thing he did when he woke up? Yeah, he beat the crap out of 2 adult lions, as in killed them, and just with his bare hands, basically. And I'm like, okay, that's a little unbelievable there. And here's the problem I had, okay? For some reason, because the premise of Dr. Stone is centered around science, that's really what it is. I mean, every chapter is either Senku explaining a new scientific principle, or expanding on a principle that was introduced earlier, or he's creating a new scientific doodad. He's like, hey, check it out, Taiju, this is hydrochloric acid, this crap could do crazy. That's the whole premise of the series. Because it was focused on science, I made this jump that therefore the entire series had to be firmly grounded in reality. And if anything happened that was, unbelievable in our world, then the credibility of the series just crumbles apart like stone. I don't know why I made that assumption, because if you just step back and think about it for a second, there are plenty of works of fiction that are based and grounded in reality, but they take a few liberties because they're entertainment. The perfect example of this is there's the movies Gravity and The Martian starring Matt Damon, okay? I love both of those movies, and most of them are firmly grounded in reality, but they're still movies. They have to make it entertaining for the audience to watch. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, he tweeted about these movies. He would talk about the stuff they did right and the stuff they did wrong. And a lot of people would get pissed at him when he did that. Like, oh, you're ruining the movie. You're saying all this stuff couldn't happen. I never took it that way. I took it like, oh, okay, this movie gets all this stuff right, but I was interested to know in the things that they bent a little bit just to make it more interesting. The one that I remember is in The Martian, which is a great movie. There's a scene where there's this huge, like, dust storm on Mars, right? And Matt Damon and all the astronauts are there, and there's this huge storm that comes out of nowhere, and it's, oh, you can't see anything. Neil explained, yeah, that can't happen. The air on Mars is way too light. It's too thin. It can't pick up all of the dust and the rocks, so you wouldn't couldn't have this really dramatic, like, dust storm on the surface of Mars. But it was a movie, and they got so much other stuff right that it looked entertaining, right? Kind of the same deal with Dr. Stone, right? The science in Dr. Stone is pretty much grounded in our reality. They take some liberties with it, sure, but it's not like they're just pulling like, oh, here's how you create hydrochloric acid. We're just pulling out the formula out of nothing, you know? No, it is really how you do it, right? They explain it in those ways. So, you know, I don't know why I couldn't just understand, like, oh, okay, the science part is real, but when it comes to the human beings in Dr. Stone, they are kind of exaggerated beyond the things that humans could do in our world, all right? Or their potential is a lot higher. I really should have picked this up from Chapter 1 when Senku is, you know, encased in stone for 3 millennia and is able to keep a calendar in his head counting up the numbers and the seconds for 3,000 years. Over 3,000 years, actually. You think at that point I would be like, okay, this is getting a little ridiculous. And then you have Taiju's ridiculous amounts of stamina, and then you have Tsukasa's ridiculous amount of strength, and that's just, if you want to think of it in a way, and kind of what I resigned myself to is Dr. Stone takes place in a parallel world very, very similar to ours. All of the physics, all of the laws of thermodynamics, all that stuff is the same, except humans just have a little bit more potential than they do in our world. So that's why you have Senku, who is a genius amongst geniuses that can remember all these scientific formulas and all these chemical compounds without any reference material. They're just locked into his brain. That's how you can have Taiju, you know, have a redonkulous, like the stamina of 100 men, even though he's a high school student. You have people like Tsukasa and Hyoga that are just ridiculously strong. Way stronger than anything that, you know, humans could probably pretty much generate right now, outside of, like, the mountain. You know what I mean? You know, but they're still vulnerable to things like Tsukasa can't tank, like, a shotgun blast. So at the end of the day, it's like, alright, he's a little stronger than the average human, but he's still weak to things like he's not invincible or anything like that. Even someone like Gen, you gotta look at him, you know, he's a master orator, he's got a silver tongue, he's capable of manipulating not just the primitive people of this world, but also the people that got resurrected from our time. He's capable of just manipulating anybody with his speech. And you just kind of roll with that, and after a while, you just get into the tone of the series, and it's exaggerated like that, and it just makes it entertaining. It makes it a lot of fun. Because at the end of the day, also, you have to sell volumes of it. You know, you have to get the series out there, and you have to have a decent villain, right? And I don't think Tsukasa would be as impactful as an antagonist if he was just the regular strength of a typical 17-year-old. You know, he's like, we're being chased by lions, Tsukasa, wake up, don't worry, oh my god, I'm being mauled by lions! You know, you have to make it, like, a little bit more, you know, interesting than that, and I like it. I like it now, okay? But maybe, hey, if you don't have that problem, then maybe you would get, you know, hooked at Chapter 1, and you could just go with it. But that was something I just had to, you know, acclimate to when first getting into it, right? So something else, though, early on in the series, am I the only one that was kind of, you know, confused on who the main character was going to be in that introduction arc? Because I'll be honest with you, I thought the main character was going to be Taiju. Yeah, I just immediately went with that. I think because Taiju conforms to so many other, like, typical shonen protagonists. You know, he's good-hearted, but he's kind of, you know, thick-headed. You know, he's not the smartest tree in the tree store, you know what I mean? Like, you know, that's Taiju, but he's a good person, right? And he's trying to confess his love for Yuzuriya, and I'm like, oh, okay, you're meeting all of the criteria for shonen protagonist here. And it seemed like the first chapter was really heavily more focused on Taiju than Senku, right? And then after about, you know, a dozen chapters or so in, you get the end of the prologue, and then you go back in time, and we focus on Senku awakening. And I don't know if that's Inagaki, you know, like maybe they weren't sure at the very, very beginning who the main character was going to be. Maybe they got a note from the editor or something like, yeah, this Taiju kid, he isn't really polling very well, but Senku is off the charts, so just make Senku the main character. Considering how Shonen Jump is, and this is a new series, and you gotta keep in mind, when a new series comes out in Shonen Jump, that thing is on the chopping block, alright? They're like, okay, you got a shot, kid, but it's like, if you're not making the sales, you're out with the trash after only a few months, alright? Because there's no shortage of mangakas in Japan that would kill to get inside a Shonen Jump, right? So it's like, if your series isn't polling well, we're getting it out of there and we're bringing something else in. And many manga have met that fate of being cut within the first 6 months of being serialized in Shonen Jump. So I don't know if that was the situation at first, but for better or for worse, and I would definitely say for better, 100%. But maybe you were really a big Taiju fan. I'm not saying anything against Taiju, man. I like Taiju. He's endearing. It's just Senku is just way more interesting of a protagonist, right? At chapter 13, the series kind of restarts, sort of, and it's like, yeah, Senku is definitely 100% the main character right here, and I think that's a great decision, okay? So, just going over the arcs and what I thought about them, this most recent arc right now, like we just kind of wrapped up, which is sort of like the precursor to the Great Age of Sail, the sailing arc, where they're gonna go out and be king of the pirates, you know? That's a really great one. Probably I would rank the Ishigami Village arc as my favorite right now. There are parts of that arc which were a little slow, but the end of it, where you get the reveal of Byakuya, you know, and the past and everything, that really clinched it for me. That was probably the single most beautiful moment in Dr. Stone that I just like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing now. This neat little thing where we have Senku's father and his group, you know, back in the present, setting things up for what's happening right now, 3,000 years into the future. That's great, and I love that. That's another thing, too, that I was like, okay, could 6 people repopulate, you know, the Earth to the level of Ishigami Village 3,000 years in the future, or would there be massive amounts of inbreeding in that process? Actually, somebody came out and actually explained it with, like, the Punnett squares and everything, and just like, all right, you know, if you gotten this many pairings and they pair up with this, it's possible. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. But even if I didn't read the explanation, I'd be like, okay, in the sense of the story of the manga, it's very impactful for Senku. This is his father, and this is the gifts that his father is giving him from 3,000 years previously that are now connecting back to right now. So it works in the context of the story, right? Okay. And then you have the Stone Wars arc, which are, you know, I'll be honest with you, a lot of times when reading this series, I'm way more interested in, like, the build-up than rather to the finish. It's kind of like the best part of the journey is not the destination, it's the journey itself sort of deal. So, during Stone Wars, we got a lot of really cool, you know, gadgets. We got the introduction of, here's how a cell phone works. Here's how an automobile works. The paper shield thing, like the carbon resin that he made. I love those chapters. And then when we finally got to the actual battle against Tsukasa's, you know, Empire of Might and the Empire of Science, you know, it was good. I liked it. And at the end, it was, you know, the finisher with yoga and everything, the reveal there. I like that as well. But the high point for the Stone War arc wasn't even the climax for me. It was all those chapters where you build up to stuff. And you know what I realized? Maybe one of the reasons I love the series so much is because of the copious amounts of tangents. Have you noticed the tangents? I've noticed the tangents. Here's the tangents, okay? So we have an overall main structure of an arc. In Ishigami Village, it was like, we need to make the penicillin to cure Ruri. Okay, awesome. So to do that, though, we need to do all this other crap. Like, we need to create electricity, we need to have iron, we need to have all these chemicals and everything. So there's that. Well, also, you're going to have tangents in those tangents. It's like, all right, but in order to make iron, we need to make a special furnace, which requires a lot of manpower, so we're going to have to figure out a way to get people from the village to help us out working on this, so we have to have another tangent chapter where we make a ramen cart, and so I love that, because I do tangents all the freaking time, right? But none of them seem boring or dull. None of them, like, when I read a chapter of Dr. Stone, you could pretty much decide right away, like, is this going to be a chapter that's going to focus on the main thing they're trying to make, or is this going to be a chapter that's just making something to help them get something that they're going to need to make their overarching thing? You can tell that right away, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not bored, because every chapter teaches you at least something you probably didn't know on how a chemical was created, or how you make a certain gadget from modern day. Because usually what Senku will do is he'll be like, oh yes, we're gonna make cell phones. Now, obviously, we're not gonna have, cell phones from modern day, and this is the reason we can't do that, but we can make something that is functioning similar, and so we also have those little side things where, Mecha Senku shows up and is like, here's how you do this at home, kids. So it's informative. It teaches people things, okay? So after you get into the flow of that, you stop thinking about, like, who cares if freaking Senku is more of a genius than any other human being that's ever existed and he's only a high school kid. I'm learning stuff from this manga, so that's all good with me, right? Probably one of the most recent things we did during the arc where they're building the boat, with Ryusui and everybody, and it's just like, oh yeah, we're gonna introduce money into society now, and clothing, because we need to have clothing to make the sails for the boat, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then we had that whole chapter on how bread was made, and I'm like, okay, I didn't know how bread was made. Do you know how bread is made? I had a basic understanding of how bread was made, but I didn't really know. I'm telling you guys, if we ever suffer some horrible apocalypse and mankind is thrust back into the Stone Ages, I'm gonna make sure to save all my volumes of Dr. Stone, because as long as I have these, then I'll be perfectly fine. It's like, oh, you want to know how to make iron? Okay, well, let me just turn to chapter 32, and we'll be set, right? That's all you need to know, right? Let me throw up the one with Kohaku here. Kohaku, best girl. Okay. This might be the first time I've ever said this, but Dr. Stone, I think, is a series that I'm more interested in the individual chapters, like standalone, than I am in the overarching story. That's very unusual. That might be the first time I've ever said something like that. Because, like, with One Piece, for example, right now, in the Wano arc, I'm not going to do spoilers, but it's like they're in Wano right now, and they start off the series there, and they gotta gather allies, and at the end of the arc, they have to fight against the big bad, Kaido. It's like, okay, so, obviously there's going to be individual chapters that are going to be maybe diverging a little bit, going off over here, all these other little stories going on, but the overarching story is the most important. How are we going to get to that endpoint? With Dr. Stone, I am interested in how they're going to get to the end point. It's just, I'm more interested in each individual chapter. Like, okay, next chapter of Dr. Stone, what new scientific thingamadoo are we going to learn about? I know what we're doing right now. We're trying to get to the other side of the world, South America, trying to figure out what happened with the petrification, but it's going to be a long arc before that. I don't think, we just had a big time skip. We just had a whole year time skip right there to just build the damn boat. So we're probably not going to be like, all right, we're sailing on the Pacific Ocean. We're just going to have a time skip to another year in the future when we finally manage to arrive at freaking South America or Chile or Peru or whatever. No, this is probably going to be a long arc, just sailing around, stopping at random islands, or, like there's a whole chapter about how Senku talks about how to protect against scurvy or other threats aboard, a sailing vessel in the middle of the ocean. We're probably going to have chapters, in fact, I hope we do. I hope we have chapters where we cut back to Ishigami Village and see how people are doing there, because they split into two teams, the sailing team, which is where most of the main cast are on, and then the other team, which is focused on, developing the world. There's a little bit of a problem with that, because, like I said, they're taking Chrome, and Taiju, and Senku, and Gen. They're taking all of the people that like their main cast and everybody, on the boat, so you're not going to have too many people on the shore that are as brilliant or as strong as those guys, and they're responsible for building up the world. But hey, it's been a year, so maybe they learned some stuff and whatever. Who knows? We'll figure that out as we go, I guess. But I hope we split between that stuff. And yeah, it's like, it's going to be a long time till we get to South America, and I'm going to enjoy this ride. Basically, that's my perspective here. I'm not sitting here like gritting my teeth like, come on, let's just get to South America already. Quit freaking screwing around with like 20-30 chapters aboard this freaking boat. Let's just get there already. But hey, that's something I really gotta commend Inagaki for, because they've written a manga that made me love it so much that I really enjoy the journey before we get to the big climax. And the climax is, of course, a big deal. Like I said, the Ishigami Village climax with Byakuya and everything, that's probably my favorite part of the entire manga. Yeah, that's the great thing about it. Every chapter is an adventure for me. In fact, in some cases, I'm actually more excited to read a chapter of Dr. Stone than I am One Piece every time I wake up on a Friday morning. Oh, I know, that might become sacrilegious, but I really do enjoy this series. And the last few weeks when we were on hiatus, I'm kind of feeling that itch, like, oh man, there's no Dr. Stone this week. Man, that's kind of that's kind of a problem, you know? But we're back right now, and we're doing the Great Age of Sail, and I'm hoping that, you know, it's an epic adventure. We're heading right now to, here's something we could talk about. This is something that's, you know, just happened, like in the last chapter, but hey, we're already spoilers deep into this, so let's just continue. So the first stop on this journey is actually going to be, as Senku put it, Treasure Island, where they're going to the island where Byakuya and his group lived on for a few years, and where the spacecraft, the Soyuz, is there and everything. He's got to get a god tier item, and he's getting excited, and I'm getting excited. I'm like, ooh, are you gonna get like the black box from the freaking space wreckage? Would it still be functional 3,000 years in the future? Or maybe he's just interested in the parts, but how much of it could really exist 3,000 years into the future? So I'm getting really excited with this. So here's my question, though. Here's something interesting. So the island that, you know, Byakuya and everybody landed on, you know, that island, I think there was like that recluse that was living there, that like hobo dude that was like, you know, he had the ship, the boat that allowed Byakuya to save everybody that was in the ocean, you know. Okay, that's the island they lived on for pretty much their entire lives, right? That's the island that they came up with the 100 Tales. That's the island where they had kids and they got married and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but that island is a decent distance away from the mainland where Ishigami Village is and everything, right? It has to be, because if it was really close to the mainland, then the Ishigami villagers would probably know about it. They would probably know, like, oh yeah, over there, you know, a few miles out to sea, there's that island where our founders lived, and then they came here. But that can't be the case. It has to be way far out into the ocean. Otherwise, you know, Senku built a freaking speedboat recently. He would have just went there already, right? So it's a decent distance away that you need to have a sailing vessel like the Perseus in order to get there. Okay. So that means that at some point during the time when Byakuya and everybody landed and they built up their society on that island, the descendants of Byakuya and the other astronauts had to have this mass exodus where they left that island and made a journey to the mainland. That had to happen at some point. So did that happen while Byakuya, you know, and Rillian were still alive? And they did that, you know, okay, this island's too small, or we're going to run out of resources eventually if we stay on this island, and if we want to make sure that our children, you know, live for generation and generation, we got to make sure to get to the mainland. So maybe Byakuya and Lillian, they made some rudimentary raft, and they calculated, like, okay, you know, the mainland's that way, but it's going to be a long distance. There's another story here. It's going to be part of the 100 Tales, most likely. But yeah, that was something that always bugged me, because I was like, okay, they're on this random island, and they're living there, and they're coming up with the 100 Tales, and the Soyuz is there and everything. But then their descendants are living on the mainland of Japan. I'm sorry. But then their descendants are living on the mainland of Japan, which means they had to leave at some point. But it's a really far distance, so I don't know if they just built like a basic raft and go, all right, kids, get on the raft, let's start sailing. I don't know what they did, but they had to do something in order to get there. And then so Senku is heading there right now. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff that was left on that island by Byakuya that, you know, will tell Senku everything he needs to know, or give some more, you know, hints about what to do, or everything they know about the petrification or something. You know, the Soyuz is a pretty, I mean, we even see it, and it's all, you know, it's not completely destroyed. It's there, but like there's a tree growing out of it and everything, and it's just like, I don't know if they're gonna find anything left in that thing that they could use, but there might be something like the black box maybe that Byakuya managed to preserve in some way to make sure it would still be active by the time they get it in the future. Who knows? I don't, but I just thought it would be an interesting point to bring up if you wanted to comment about that below, you know, on the story with that. Also, I mean, hey, are we going to find out about all the 100 Tales? Because I would like to. This might be, no, maybe not all of them, because 100, that's a big number. It depends. You know, there's plenty of, like, going back to Bleach, it's like, oh, there's, like, you know, 200 keto spells, but we only learn about, like, a dozen or so, maybe 2 dozen at most. We don't learn about that many keto, right? But when it comes here, 100 Tales, we already know about, like, a few of them. You know, we're going to learn about all 100 or not. I don't know how that's going to work, but it would be cool, because I'm a completionist, and I like that kind of stuff. But, yeah, other than that, I just really wanted to make a Dr. Stone-centric video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, so with that being said, Tekking101 signing out. Later, everybody. Make sure to get your stone, get it, because it's it's soap, but it's Dr. You guys understand what it means. I'm just gonna put that in there right now. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a good one. Tekking signing out. I'm gonna be an astronaut when I grow up.